that's like the biggest criticism of modern Marvel and DC is people sitting around in coffee shops talking. It's like,
Yeah.
the example that I always give is I want to say Daredevil 145 or around there somewhere. I'll say 119, but it's Black Widow and Daredevil. They're living in San Francisco, and Natasha is like, "Are we a couple now? You know, are we exclusive? Do we want children? Like, where is this relationship going?" And Daredevil's like, "Well, you know how we live now. Is it right to have kids and blah blah blah?" While that conversation is going on, they're jumping off of skyscrapers, hitting flagpoles, flinging. They stop a burglary. They stop a mugger. They save the kid who's about to get hit by a car. If this was a modern Marvel comic, they would have been in the kitchen holding a cup of coffee.
Good evening, listeners, brave navigators of the enigmatic and the concealed. Have you ever felt the pull of the unanswered, the allure of the mysteries that shroud our existence? For more than a decade, a unique comic publisher has dared to dive into these mysteries, unafraid of the secrets they might uncover. This audacious entity is Paranoid American. Welcome to the mystifying universe of the Paranoid American podcast.
Launched in the year 2012, Paranoid American has been on a mission to decipher the encrypted secrets of our world. From the unnerving enigma of MK Ultra mind control to the clandestine assemblies of secret societies. From the awe-inspiring frontiers of forbidden technology to the arcane patterns of occult symbols in our very own pop culture. They have committed to unveiling the concealed realities that lie just beneath the surface. Join us as we navigate these intricate landscapes, decoding the hidden scripts of our society and challenging the accepted perceptions of reality.
Folks, I've got a big problem on my hands. There's a company called Paranoid American making all these funny memes and comics. Now, I'm a fair guy. I believe in free speech as long as it doesn't cross the line. And if these AI-generated memes dare to make fun of me, they're crossing the line.
This is your expedition into the realm of the extraordinary, the secret, the shrouded. Come with us as we sift through the world's grand mysteries, question the standardized narratives, and brave the cryptic labyrinth of the concealed truth. So strap yourselves in, broaden your horizons, and steel yourselves for a voyage into the enigmatic heart of the Paranoid American podcast, where each story, every image, every revelation brings us one step closer to the elusive truth.
Welcome, everybody, to another Paranoid American podcast. And today, we're both going to meet someone for the first time, a little bit. So this is John Bua, and I'm going to introduce him. I'll let him introduce himself, but I just want to note where I came across John as I was in another comic sort of YouTube live stream, and someone popped into the chat, and they were like, I just came from this channel called John's Long Box, and it's one of the best comic YouTube channels on the internet. And I was like, all right, I had to go and check this out. And I clicked on it and I saw this amazing collection of different comics and a lot of insight and probably way more of an expert on comics in general. So I figured what better than to bring John's Long Box in, John Bua. So welcome to Paranoid American. I think we're going to have some fun here. So tell people, first of all, where to find you, what you're all about, and we'll get into some other cool stuff.
I'm at John's Long Box on YouTube. You know, just like it's spelled right there. You could look me up on YouTube, and I've been doing it for over 3 years now. You know, it started during COVID. It was a lockdown. I'm a kind of an extroverted person. I like to talk about comics with people, and I moved. I didn't know anybody, so I just turned on a camera, my phone, just started talking about comics for like a year and a half before I even got like more than 3 or 4 views on a video. So it was just me talking to nobody, but you know, you're lonely during the lockdowns. And then RJ from the Fourth Age, I don't know if you're familiar with him. I was just in his comments all the time talking, and he was just talking about comic collections. I was like, hey, RJ, I got 55,000 comics. And he was like, really? So I emailed him a picture of my collection, and then he just started talking to me, and he invited me on his channel because he wanted to start interviewing people. So I was his test monkey, and it was really bad. His camera kept turning off, and you know, the static, and you know, but it was fun. And so I said, why don't you come on my channel and you'll be my test monkey? And I really like talking to people. And since RJ had like 20,000 viewers, that gave me a little bit of credibility. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to ask Mike Barron. And Mike Barron came on, and I had like 150 subscribers. And so, you know, and then Mike Barron, oh man, I bombed so bad. You could look at my first Mike Barron interview. It was excruciating. But and then I made a video about Red Rooster and the Saints, the Allegiance Arts of Mitch Breitweiser's comics, how much I loved them. And they invited themselves on my channel. So that would, you know, so now I'm like, oh my God, I'm talking to like legit comic book people. So I just said, you know what, I'm gonna just ask everybody. Just gonna ask everybody and see what they say. A couple of people outright said no, a couple of people were polite, but as long as they didn't say no, I still had a chance. You know what I mean? So I was asking like Jim Shooter. I'm still talking with Walt Simonson. Walt Simonson for 2 years hasn't said no. So I'm hoping that happens.
So you're saying there's a chance.
yeah. Until you say no, like I got like Tom DeFalco's coming on next week. Carol Leigh, I don't know if you know her. She did Wonder Woman for a while. So I just shoot for the start. I've been asking like movie stars and you know, I just asked Jim Butcher from the Dresden Files. Hasn't said no. So, you know, you don't get what you don't ask for. So that's been my model. Just keep asking. You know, a few people said no, and then like a couple months later, I guess they checked me out and they're like, yeah, you know what, I'll come on, and it's been fun. I try to keep it drama free. I try to just talk about comics. You know, I'm also a board gamer, so I had a few board game celebrities come on and talk about that. But for the most part, it's just comics, sometimes board games. So that's my story.
And you said that you started this originally because you're an extrovert and you couldn't go out to comic shops, I assume, and just like chat people up about books. Has this replaced that? Like you having a channel, has it eventually replaced your need to go out into comic shops, or do you do that too still?
Well, my comic store closed years ago, so I've been getting comics from the discount comic book service. You know, I've been doing that for like close to 10 years. So I get my comics mailed to me. And then when I moved to this area, I don't know anybody. You know, let's face it, when you're 50 years old, you want to be friends. So for like a year, I was just like, all right, I don't know anybody. And then my wife pointed out that there was a comic book store and a game store, both within walking distance. Shows you, because I just would wake up, go to work. I'm a construction worker. I'm waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm coming home at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm just tired, you know. So she's an introvert, but she knows how much I like to go out and talk with people. So she found place. So I started going to the game store, and through the game store, I met a whole group of gamers. So that we, on Mondays and Tuesdays, we come to my house, we play board games. You know, then I went to a comic book store, but comic book people are a little bit more introverted. You know, it's a solo activity. You buy your Batman, you sit home, you read Batman. So a weirdo like me just walking in, talking to everybody, you know, but the gamers, board games, you need people to play board games, you know, so that was easier. You sit down at the table, you play a game, you chit chat over a 2-hour game of Ticket to Ride. You know what I mean? And
that's actually a really interesting dynamic I'd never considered before. And you're absolutely right that the comic book is like a solo sport. So you might have more introverts that are like, why is this guy trying to chat me about his favorite new 52 title or whatever? Like, go away.
And then when you go to the comic book store, people just buy their comics and leave. You know what I mean? Like when I was a kid, when we were all 15, we would hang out at the comic book store and talk. And then I worked in the comics, so I knew everybody that came in. And I loved like having the same conversation. Oh, the Fantastic Four this month, blah, 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 Galactus. And then the next guy would come in. Oh, the Fantastic Four this, you know. And that it was just easy because I worked there, and you know, so it wasn't weird. But now, if I'm going to hang out, everybody's younger than me. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? And,
you're an OG now, right?
Yeah, well, you know what I mean. I don't really like Marvel and DC. I get excited now about independent comics. So I'll go to the comic book store and I'm like, I'll buy a back issue from 1978. Nobody wants to talk about that with me, so you know. So I'll go to the game store, play. You know, these guys are all playing Warhammer. I'm sorry?
Like, hey kids, who wants to talk about Dazzler?
Yeah. You guys want to talk about the original Defenders? You know, Steve Gerber, who's been dead for 15 years. You know, So
can you remember your first comic?
Yeah, absolutely. The first comic I ever bought with my own money was Fantastic Four 184. And it was a Fantastic Four. It was Len Wein wrote it, George Perez drew it, and Joe Sinnott inked it. It was Fantastic Four versus the Molecule Man and Claw. And it was just a bizarre story because Reed Richards lost his power. You know, they were coming back from another adventure, and then another villain attack. It was like you were just thrown in the middle. So it made me realize I got to go back and get older issues. You know, the next issue I got to finish. You know what I mean? It was just like a weird, but it was worth the work. I loved it so much. So in my mind, George Perez has always been the superhero artist because that's the first comic book. I have two older brothers, so I remember having some like Justice League and Justice Society issues laying around the house, you know, and some Flash. But that was the first comic I bought, sat down and read over and over and over again. And then I remember I got Thor 286 with Walt Simonson drawing with Thor smashing the Destroyer's head. And, you know, these were such good comics. So I you know, Walt Simonson and George Perez, these are like lifelong obsessions with me, you know. Coincidentally, they were my two first comics. And then I remember the first X-Men I got was X-Men 112. They were presumed lost in the Savage Land, and Beast and Jean Grey and Xavier were like, you know, like lamenting the death of the X-Men. And then they cut to the X-Men, and, you know, and I didn't know who the X-Men were. The X-Men, we forget, they were bi-monthly. They were this close to getting canceled. I just happened to stumble upon it. You know, and I didn't even know who the X-Men were. And so I didn't know their names. And for the most part, they didn't have their masks on. So like, I didn't know who was who. Like Colossus is this big blue metal guy. Like this guy kind of has the same hair but it was worth the work. And I went and found, and then within about 6 months, a comic book store opened in my neighborhood. And that was a game changer because back then you got comics just when they came out on the newsstand, you know, it's on a spinner rack. And if you missed them, you missed them. But now there was a store that just sold comic books, you know, and then you win it. And then you got all these titles that you never heard of before. You know, it was just the most amazing thing. So I was like, I got to work here. You know, I would go once a week. I found out the new comics used to come out like on Tuesdays. Then it changed to Friday. Then it was Thursday. Then it settled on Wednesday. And I used to be there and help the guy take the boxes out, put them on the shelves and count them. And then eventually he hired me. And I was there for like on and off for like 6 years at that comic store. I loved it. Such a fun job. I mean, some weeks I never got paid. I just took my pay in comics, you know. I loved it, you know. And
you're getting high on your own supply a little bit.
Exactly. My mom used to tell me, you got to quit. So she actually made me quit. And I worked in a supermarket because, you know, because I would have money. You know, I would work like, then after the supermarket, I would go work part-time at the comic book store. Then, you know, then I left the supermarket, went back to the comic books.
Did the supermarket have a spinner rack? Because I remember growing up, my supermarkets, almost all of them had a spinner rack.
No, my supermarket never had a spinner rack. No, but like the 7-Elevens did, you know, the stationery stores. I don't know if you remember stationery stores. You know, they were small little, like, yeah, they stationery stores, they sold like Oak Tag, you know, school supplies, cigarettes, candy, comic books, Lotto. You know, they were these little, you know, more than a newsstand. You know, they're like a thing that doesn't exist anymore. You'd go in there with your dad. Your dad would buy smokes, get a lottery ticket, comic books, candy, and then you're like, oh yeah, I have a project due, and you go in the back and you get like construction paper and loose leaf. They were all over the place when I was a kid, and I loved them because they would just get comics and never return them. So they would just have stacks and stacks and stacks. You'd go, that was like your last place because they were always old and beat up, but they had older comics. You know, Howie would forget to return them all. That was the best. I remember I got the first Daredevil with Frank Miller there, and I loved it. And I went back and he had like all of them, you know, except for one that I was missing, you know, and that became like an obsession to get the one Frank Miller Daredevil that I was missing. That was fun. You know, comics were so good back then. How could we not be obsessed with them?
I can't help but notice that the first three that you mentioned, actually, I mean, hell, like the 5 or 6 that you ended up mentioning were all Marvel. And then
Right.
you mentioned that your brothers were kind of in the DC, so Justice League, right?
No, it's not that they were into DCs. It's just it just happened to be around. But my older brothers, they just casually picked up a comic. So I think they were, because my older brother had a Fantastic Four poster and in the room, like since I was a kid.
Okay, so no family like Marvel versus DC brawls.
No. But my friend Mike was into DC, and I didn't like DC. Like, you know, once you read like Frank Miller's Daredevil, and then you go to the same time at DC, and it's like Batman's going to another planet because somebody stole his costume. You know what I mean? It's like, so I always thought that DC was for real little kids. And then when you got older, mature, you got Marvel comics. And he was like, yeah, no. Because at the time, like now I'm going back at the same time, like 1972, 1974, I'm getting Jonah Hex comics and Sergeant Rock. These were not little kid comics, you know, but the Green Lantern and Flash, I thought were a little childlike, but it was almost like there was two companies within DC, you know, the war and the Westerns. These were on par with Marvel as far as like adult situations and mature, you know, obviously still appropriate for the newsstand. But man, read Jonah Hex, that was not for little kids. You know, that was such good stuff, especially Sergeant Rock. I just read a Sergeant Rock the other day that I was like, this was like nerve-wracking because it was people who were dying in a war, you know, houses were getting blown up. And
Yeah,
then,
so Sergeant Rock is kind of like along the vein of like the G.I. Joe and like a lot of just the old school military Marine comic books that were basically their own genre for the longest time.
right. That's another thing is now like mainstream comics, it's all superheroes. You know,
Mhm.
they had war, they had Westerns, they had sci-fi, they had detective back, you know, in my memory. And then just before me, there was like girl comics that they called them, like Millie the Model and Kathy, and you know, and then even like Archie comics had like or is it
Right.
Harvey comics that had like Wendy the Witch and Sabrina. Like there was all of these different types. You didn't. And I remember wading through all like, I don't want Wendy, I don't want Casper. Oh, cool, Fantastic Four. These are good comics. The rest of these, you know, now I'm reading old Justice League from the 60s, you know, the Julius Schwartz stuff where it's just like an alien has swapped your powers and you're confused. And I'm enjoying them now as charming, almost like Scooby-Doo stories. You know, they don't, I guess I'm kind of tired of grim and gritty. You know, it's been 40 years of grim and gritty. Now I'm kind of really enjoying the old school Silver Age DC stuff.
Where does Lobo fit on your scale?
I never liked Lobo. There's a couple of characters I never liked. I never liked Lobo, and I never liked Deadpool. And I know and I never liked Cable.
They're very similar. Deadpool and Lobo. I kind of
Right.
see them in like they break the fourth wall constantly. They're
I-
snarky. They're like self-aware.
Well, Lobo, I always thought this is what a nerd thinks a cool guy is like.
The Lobo was my favorite DC.
You know what I mean? Like when you're just like an introverted comic book guy, and you're like, I'm gonna make the coolest guy. He's gonna have muscles, and he's gonna ride a motorcycle,
Oh, yeah.
and he's gonna curse. You know what I mean? Like
You're not wrong, man. You're not wrong.
Yeah.
You got me pegged.
I never liked Lobo. Deadpool, I don't like when characters break the fourth wall. And as much as I love John Byrne, that She-Hulk, that still bothered me when She-Hulk broke the fourth wall. But I tolerated it because it was John Byrne. You know,
What about Rob Liefeld pouches? Where are you at on these? Net
I was one of the
positive, net
meanest
negative?
people when it came to Rob Liefeld. I hated Image Comics. You know, I started collecting comics in 1974. So like by the time Image came out, you know, that was like, you young kids, you don't like anything good anymore. Like I hated the early Image stuff. I bought them, and all I could think of is these aren't good. These are just not good. They're Image. The stories suck, and I like the stories.
Now, is this Max included? Because that's Sam
No,
Keith's
I was going to
note?
say Max.
Right.
There's a few exceptions. Gen 13 was actually well written.
I was going to bring that one up too. Yeah.
13. Max. I was just talking about Max last night. Max was one of the first comics that I had the whole set. I read them every month, and then somewhere down the line, I'm like, I need to reread this. I'm not getting some of these references, and I didn't miss an issue. So Max, I really liked because it was Image Comics, which I didn't really have a high regard for, but that comic demanded a lot of the reader. So I had to sit down and I think it was around issue 10. I had to sit down, turn off the music and just, this is what I'm doing. I'm reading Max. It was, I don't want to say adult because that always means dirty or whatever, but it was a comic that demanded a lot from the reader. And I really respected it, because I remember a guy in the comic store was telling me about the Max. I'm like, that's not the Max. He's like, yeah, it is. He's picking up the issue. I'm like, I read that, there was deeper layers to that comic. I really liked Max.
Are you referencing when you're saying you're talking about two different comics and you're picking up? Is this about how it was, a person basically going through a mental breakdown and jumping in and out of sanity?
And I was just reading it like a superhero book. You know what I mean?
Right. It almost seems like he just teleports to a fantasy dimension. He teleports back, but why is he sleeping on the street every once in a while? Why is he crashing at the?
Yeah, and I didn't get that it was a mental breakdown. You know what I mean? And so I was just like, okay, he's literally going into the dreaming, and it's like a superhero story, and I'm like, oh, this is on a whole another level. You know what I mean? And so that was and Pitt, I thought was well written, but Max was the first Image Comics. I thought that was okay, this company is pulling out, because I read the Wildcats, Youngblood, Supreme, and I was like, it's just splash pages posing, and half the time the art really isn't that good. I was never a fan of Rob Liefeld's art, never liked it, and then all of a sudden, I'm going to say around 98 or so, Image became so good. If you remember, they got Alan Moore taking over Supreme. I can't remember the writer that took over Wildcats with Brett Booth and Travis Charest were doing the art, and it just boomed. Then the Warren Ellis came out with Planetary, and then Image I thought was the best company for I'd say a good 5-6 years. So Image took all the artists, but they were almost dismissive of the writers for a long time. And then I remember they hired Chuck Dixon to write Prophet, and I was really excited, and it still sucked. I wonder, did they edit Chuck Dixon, or did Chuck Dixon just do a paycheck, or did he just not get it? Because I know, I forget that Michael Swarinsky, he took a job for Image, and he didn't write. We'll pay you to use your name, but we already got the comic done. We just need to.
We need some clout.
we need to credit a right. So I wonder if that's what they did with that. But and at the same time, it's they took all the talent from Marvel. So if the 90s Marvel was terrible, so I had a really bad taste in my mouth about Image Comics for a long time. Around 93, 94, 95, DC and Marvel sucked. Oh, but back to DC, the Crisis on Infinite Earths changed everything. Then I became a DC freak. So I collected everything from DC and Marvel from the Crisis on Infinite Earth to about 2015, where I just dropped Marvel and DC.
Well, you were describing your initial impression of DC as maybe being a little bit juvenile.
Right.
And then it kind of turned you off for a long time. And I know most people that I know outside of the internet bubble of my social media friends and stuff, right? But most people I know, a lot of them still look at all comic books. They don't care what label or title or anything. It's all oh yeah, I'm not 14. Why do I? Right. I'm just curious because, 55,000, you're in your 50s, you've been collecting since the 70s. Could you make a compelling pitch to someone that's, 40, 50, you're a peer of you, a pitch to why you should consider reading a comic book?
Well, it's, to me, I don't want to convince anybody to do anything they don't want to do. If I got to twist somebody's arm to read comics, I'm not going to twist somebody's arm to sit down and play a board game with me.
I'll be the muscle here. You can be the good cop. I'll be the bad cop.
But but if somebody was to say you got a whole room dedicated to comic books, you got 50. And I'll say the same thing. It's do you watch Star Wars? Do you watch Time Bandits? Do you watch Game of Thrones? Do you watch? Do you read novels? Because comic books are just pure imagination with no constraints. All, it's just ideally the best comics, in my opinion, are a writer artist. One guy just from his brain drawing, and you could do whatever you want without a special effects budget. So and I say, whatever movie did you like? Comic books did it first 30 years ago, and which is why I didn't read Western comics, and I didn't read war comics as a kid, because you could do it on TV, you could do it in the movies. But superheroes, and for the most part space stuff, you couldn't really do it well. Comics did it best. Comics had this unlimited imagination. I remember, what was it, 92, when the Terminator sequel came out, everybody was talking about the Terminator. And I was just like, yeah, Jack Kirby did that. That's the Absorbing Man. He did that in the 60s, 30 years earlier. The Matrix, they did stuff like that in the comics, 20 years earlier. And I said, whatever is cool in the movies, comics did it. And, people are like, okay, but their argument is it's expensive. I'm paying $5. I'm getting a piece of a story. I got to wait a month. That's all valid, and I understand that, but I'm just used to it. I like waiting a month thinking about the story. I'm like, oh, where's this going to go? How's this going to happen? Rereading it, looking at the art again, and then you get the story. And you're like, oh man, it went a different direction. Or, oh yeah, I was right.
It's almost like the antithesis of modern social media consumption, right? Where you're not waiting a month between something that's going to take you an hour maybe to read through. Like, you can't just keep scrolling through and get to the end.
Right. It's funny because my wife and I will we'll get interested in a TV show, and we'll watch one episode, and I'm like, okay. And she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I got to think about it. Yeah. She gets so mad because to the point where she wants to binge it and see what's going on. I'm like, no, I got to think about this. We watch.
That's like comic books have taken over your brain.
Like when Game of Thrones came out, I think it was already up to the 4th season before I got interested in it. And we watched it Sunday nights. Sunday nights was Game of Thrones. We could have watched all the episodes, but we watched one episode every Sunday until we were caught up. And then once we were caught up, I think they came out once a week anyway. But I wanted to think about it. It was, Breaking Bad is the only show I ever binge watched. And I remember 3 episodes. You know what I mean? I could tell you what happened, but when people bring up stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, that kind of happened. And
I can see that. I remember a different culture too in the 90s, or even the up until the 2000s, where you'd see a show and you wouldn't see it again for another week, but then you would talk about it with people for that next week, and you'd be theorizing on it and oh wow, I didn't think about that. And yeah, and it really does kind of hook its sink its hooks a little bit deeper in your brain that way. Right.
How many, I could still almost talk word for word dialogue of the first Star Wars movie. You know what I mean? But do you remember what happened in The Mandalorian? Because you watched it every day. You watched the whole season in a week.
Don't hate me. I've never really liked Star Wars. I
don't hate you because I hate Star Wars. There's 3 Star Wars movies, and that's it. That's it.
And I just wanted to kind of reiterate something that you mentioned, because it's honestly the best advice that I ever got when I started working in comics. And I think it was from Dana Carey. But he mentioned to me, and I was asking him, what should I do with these scripts, and should I do comic and all this? And he basically said, think of comics as this realm where you can hire all the special effects artists and the biggest set designs you can imagine, and it doesn't cost any of that. If you're paying a certain rate, or if you're drawing it yourself and it takes you 20 hours to draw a page, the only difference is maybe 8 hours. Or if you were going to do this as a movie or a TV show, it would be an $80 million budget for this scene. You can just draw it. And that's actually not just what makes comics cool, but that was the advice, is to exploit that. Make it so that your comic book would be the equivalent of $1 billion movie if someone actually had to create it. And there's no other medium still that really lets you do that.
That's the biggest criticism of modern Marvel and DC is people sitting around in coffee shops talking.
Yeah.
The example that I always give is I want to say Daredevil 145 or around there somewhere. I'll say 119, but it's Black Widow and Daredevil. They're living in San Francisco, and Natasha is like, "Are we a couple now? You know, are we exclusive? Do we want children? Like, where is this relationship going?" And Daredevil's like, "Well, you know how we live now. Is it right to have kids and blah blah blah?" While that conversation is going on, they're jumping off of skyscrapers, hitting flagpoles, flinging. They stop a burglary. They stop a mugger. They save the kid who was about to get hit by a car. If this was a modern Marvel comic, they would have been in the kitchen holding a cup of coffee. You know what I mean? And like, there's nothing wrong with what they're talking about. But like you said, the budget is infinite. They could have been flying in a rocket ship.
They could have been teleporting through different dimensions on every other page. Right. Every time you turn that page, it could be a whole new world.
Monster.
And you wouldn't even have to have any exposition. You would just be like, "Oh wow, this is cool. I'm in a comic. I like this." Yeah.
Right. So you're absolutely right. That's one of the things about it. Gives you cool. And if you're making a comic book, like, again, there's nothing. You got to have that panel of Matt Murdock getting out of bed, rubbing his head, going, "Oh." You know what I mean? I got this case today and blah, 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 blah. And then the next, all right, I need to work off this angst. And he puts on his suit and then goes outside and beats up people. But you know what I mean? Like a whole comic of like existential angst of sitting in the Starbucks. Like, what is the nature of our relationship?
I hadn't considered that. It's another really good point that modern Marvel in particular, yeah, but there's a lot of people just sitting around and talking, laying in bathtubs on the phone and texting each other. Like, what are we doing here?
Oh, that drives me nuts when I see a comic and I see texts. You know what I mean? That drives me nuts. It's like, why is that? Because that's the writer's life. You know what I mean? Like I look at, you know, Jack Kirby, this guy fought in a war, you know, he raised kids, you know, he created everything. Stan Lee, you know, he went to war. He was working when he was 14 and going to Manhattan every day. You know, I don't want to read, what was it? I think one of the last Marvel comics I got was Champions. And it was like Kamala Khan talking to one of the other teen superheroes. And it was text messages back and forth. And it's, okay, there's really no difference between a text message and a caption if you want to think about it like that. But there was literally them holding a phone, and I'm reading the drawing of a phone with text message. It's like, this is supposed to be a comic book. Why aren't they, you know, on a motorcycle, you know, screaming with a headset on, stopping a robbery, and then the other person is like, "Oh yeah, I hear what you're saying, Kamala," as she's rescuing somebody who fell out of a plane and their parachute didn't open. You can get the same information out, but it's just more fun this way. Because I think this is mean to say, but these people didn't grow up reading comics. They just all of a sudden think comics are cool, so now they went in on it because comics are cool. I like comics because they're cool, so that's why I like comics. That's how I want to write comics. But you know. I always joke around. "Oh, you want to write comics? Let me see your comic collection." Like if I was, you're coming to me for a job writing comics or drawing comics. Let me see your comic collection. You know, I don't want to see your Comixology report, your digital. I want to see dog-eared comic books. I want to see long boxes that are frayed and you know that beloved. What was the first comic you ever read? You know, you asked me, that was one of your first questions. Everybody who loves comics not only can tell you the first comic that they read, but I could tell you where I got it, you know, who I shared it with, you know, me and Mike, my buddy Mike, going back and forth, and he was giving me a Defenders comic, you know, as we were like he's pretending to read my comic because he's really watching to see if I'm getting excited reading that Defenders comic at the same, you know, but you know, you don't get that in modern comics anymore.
Well, I'd love to have you read like my comic horoscope based on the first comic I remember getting.
Oh, so, you write comics?
Yeah. No, I've been writing and self-publishing comics since 2012. I was at Disney.
Now I'm embarrassed that I didn't know that.
Stuff. Well, I don't blame you because I've only recently come out of my little hidey hole. Like I was kind of the most introverted you could imagine. Didn't even tell anyone I was working on this stuff. And now I've got like a decade worth of it. So I'm out of my hole.
Stan Lee is gone, man. You got to promote yourself.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I want to know, like, what does the first comic that I remember buying for myself and falling in love with tell you about me? And just don't hold back because you don't know me personally anyways. so feel free to burn bridges and anything. But I know exactly it was a Ralph Snart comic from Now Comics, and I bought it from a tobacco shop that my dad went and got his cigarettes from, and that I fell in love with Ralph Snart.
Ralph Snart, if I remember correctly, that was First Comics, and that was like Ralph Snart Private Eye or something like that.
I don't know if it was that the one I remember was Now Comics. I don't know if he started out on First.
Yeah, I remember those. I got some Ralph Snart comics. I'm not going to say anything bad. You bought it at a cigar shop. I remember there was a cigar shop near me that
had the Indian out front and everything, like the OG. Yep.
Up Timo, I think it was called. It was near the supermarket. So when I was really, really looking for a comic, I would ask to go food shopping with my parents, and we would go to the super, and I'd be like, "I'm going to go to the cigar shop." My parents knew I was looking for comics, but it was always like the timer would go off because all the comics were on the same shelf with Playboys and Hustlers. You know what I mean? And so the guy would be helping people, and then he would see a little kid. He didn't know if I was looking at comics or looking at stuff I shouldn't be looking at. This is before the internet. So I'm like, look at trying to get. I was trying to get Marvel Premiere number 49, the second half of the Ant-Man story, and I'm looking and looking and looking, but there's a Playboy right over there. So you're like, and you open up the Playboy, and it's never opens up to a naked picture. So you're like. And now the heart's beating because it's only a matter of time before he yells at me. And I found the Ant-Man comic. I was like, oh my God, this is so good. Paid for it and left. I love cigar shops. They always had, it was a good excuse to look at something you shouldn't be looking at while pretending to look for comics.
I like too. You were starting to give me some really interesting hot takes on Image. Could I throw a couple others and just get your takes on around that time? You mentioned Terminator when the Terminator movie came out, and you're like, "Oh, it's already been done." Well, I also remember one of the first comic books that blew my socks off because I was like, "Oh, comics can be for adult too," and it was a Dark Horse, and I believe they redid the Terminator and Terminator 2 movies as comics,
right?
But that was my first introduction to Dark Horse. So what did you think about Dark Horse and
Dark Horse Comics is amazing. They're one of the I gave up on Marvel and DC around 2015. I just thought that they were disrespectful to the continuity. You don't get to rewrite Jack Kirby and Roy Thomas and all these guys. So I wasn't enjoying it anymore. But Dark Horse I still get because Dark Horse is the home of like Hellboy, and I am a Hellboy freak. I think right now Usagi Yojimbo, I'm looking over here because I know I got some Usagi Yojimbo is Dark Horse, which is probably my favorite comic that's still coming out. I'm trying to think. I get anything Mike Mignola Hellboy related, but I got a lot of Dark Horse comics. They did a series of like a superhero universe with Ghost, X. I'm trying to remember the other characters, but I got all of those. Dark Horse was at one point that was like the up and coming big deal comic book company. Concrete. Oh my God, Concrete was such a great comic. Yeah, I'm trying to remember what else Dark Horse had. And I'm mixing it up with First Comics. I was going to say American Flag, but that was First. Yeah, Dark Horse was really good, and I still get them. Now I'm curious to go look at what did I just order this month because I'm sure I got some Dark Horse comics. But I still look through Image because Image is a confederation of self-owned credit, so you never know what's going to happen that month. But I still get Image. I still get Dark Horse. Fantagraphics I always look through because Love and Rockets I still like. And then there's like a small company, Alterna Comics. I pretty much get anything that they make.
Yeah, they're the ones that do the on newsprint, and they've got like dirt cheap prices. It's like you can get like a year's worth of comics almost for $50 sometimes, and they have those.
Their last. Well, unfortunately, they're only like crowdfunded. You have to go online and find them now because comic book stores are getting weird. But like for like $15, you'll get like everything that they offer for a couple of months. And I was like, I don't know who these people are. I don't know anything about $15 for a stack of comics, and they were all awesome. Awesome. I'm looking over here, but I just filed. That's what I was doing today. I was filing comics all day.
I assume that's most days if you've got a collection of 55,000.
In case you're wondering, I'm wearing this neck brace. I got to a car accident and I literally broke my neck. So I had boxes of comics all on the floor, and my wife wouldn't let me move them. But this is my 4th week, and I'm just going stir crazy. So she's back in the office. She's driving to the office today, so I'm just like, all right, and I'm picking up boxes and filing things. I just can't stand it anymore. There's only so much a man can sit still and not do anything before they go crazy.
You were kind of mentioning how comic shops have gotten a little bit weird lately. What do you mean by that?
Oh, no, it's not the thing. Well, what I mean is, it's that what I'm talking about is it's like when I was a kid, comic book stores were filled with kids. There was always kids throwing their bicycles down, and you know stepping over bicycles. There was 100 kids in buying comics. But now when you go into a comic shop now, you don't see kids, and you see people on the older side, like 45-year-olds, looking through comics, and you're not just going to walk up to another 45-year-old. Hey, you like latest issue of Batman? You want to hang out? You want to talk? They're like, they got stuff to do. They got their own kids. They got a job. This is something that their wife is at the supermarket over there, and they just got 25 minutes to get some stuff. You know what I mean? So that's what I mean. The comic book stores used to be like cool hangouts. We would get our comics and either hang out in the store or hang out in front of the store, and who would win in a fight, Ben Grimm or Wolverine, and could Batman beat Green Lantern, and it's hours upon hours, but you don't see that anymore. They're ghost towns.
You're totally right on that too, and I kind of think, because you mentioned earlier how comics were like a solo introverted kind of thing, and games would be more social, but like the town that I grew up in, they only had one comic book shop, at least within like 20 miles. If you could get your parents to drive you another 20, maybe there was another one. But
which state are you in?
This was in Florida. I'm still in Florida now.
Okay.
I'm in Orlando, but this was in South Florida, right around like Fort Myers, Naples area, way before it was developed. And there was a place called Comics in the Attic, and it was basically just a storage unit that would open up their door, and they had like two storage units connected, but they had turned it into a legit shop. It looked like a little dinky, you know what I mean? But and that almost forced me to socialize, because they also had Magic card tournaments there, and comics and little collectibles and stuff. So you might go there and want to be an introvert, but you're surrounded by extroverts because there's a bunch of people there playing games and stuff. So you get kind of like wrapped into all this, and it almost became, since it was the one place you could go as a kid, if you rode your bike there, if you had your parents drop you off, it was in the middle of a freaking storage unit, like industrial area. So there wasn't anything else around. So very often, if you found yourself at this comic shop, you were there for 2 or 3 hours, maybe, right? Like that was the thing. That
sounds fun. Yeah. There's nothing else to do. I don't know if you know Don Chin, but he wrote Radioactive Adolescent Black Belt Hamsters. His parents had a Chinese restaurant, and he operated a comic book store from their apartment upstairs above the Chinese restaurant. He said, so he would have people coming into his house, and he would be selling comics. And then he started getting so successful, he opened up a legit store. So I love hearing that, like these little, almost like speakeasies for comics,
Well, it was just 30 years ago too. So yeah, I guess to contrast it with today, it would shock me if someone was like, yeah, I opened up a little comic shop and it started doing gangbusters, and now we're expanding. It's like, just printing money. That almost seems, I wouldn't say impossible, but that would seem like the biggest anomaly that I'd heard of in the comic world for a while.
All comic book stores now, either they're concentrating on back issues, or toys, or Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering, like whether you're a game store or a comic book store, like if you're a nerd store, stereotypical, it's Magic the Gathering or Pokemon.
Or Lorcana, which is the new Disney Magic the Gathering.
I can you get Lorcana at comic book stores? I thought that was only like a Disney.
Not the ones by me. The best comic book shop that I know is Bluebird, which is Blackbird, which is right here in Central Florida, and they just won an Eisner or something. But yeah, they do like big Lorcana release events and games and all sorts of stuff. I gotta
go. Now I'm curious. I'll go to the local comic book store, see if they sell Lorcana. Yeah.
So I want to ask too, I guess the difference between 80s, 90s comic book shops, where rightfully you would walk in and see a bunch of kids, sometimes 10, 20, 30 double digits. now if I go into a comic shop, even if there's people in there, like it would be packed if there was like 15 and it wasn't like a Funko Pop release date of some kind where they just drop like the Boys limited edition where you've got like a line of people, but on just normal traffic. And also there's, when I first started making my own comics, I had these like pie in the sky ideas that I would go to all the different local comic shops and they would have my books on some like local creators shelf and all that. And I quickly realized over time that, oh no, we have to pay, you know, Diamond X amount every month and we have to get this minimum amount and we have to put those on the shelves because we already bought them and we just don't have room for anything. Maybe in like this dark, dingy corner behind like a black curtain and like, so it almost seemed that I was expecting this like lift everyone up sort of environment with comic book shops, but it feels so much more corporate than I ever expected it to. Did that change at a certain point, or has that always been the case?
You know, back when, you know, when I was working at the comic book store, I didn't know the business. I just knew the comics and the characters. You know, when I was 19 years old, I opened up a pizzeria, and that's when I started knowing business. But it was the pizza business, and I would go to the comic book store. I was still buying my comics, you know. And it was funny because there was another comic book store across the street from my pizzeria, and so I didn't really know the ins and outs of the business. But I remember Larry took me to a retailers convention, you know. So this was the first time I was seeing like, but because he was super introverted. You know, he opened up the comic book store because he was into comics and he stuttered and he was a little awkward. So it was kind of like, what else am I going to do with my life?
That's my favorite kind of comic book store owner, though. It's someone that just has a collection so big that they have to justify it by turning it into a store. So they're not like, I'm not a hoarder. I'm not an addict. It's a business.
You just described, but he knew everything about comics, like the more esoteric, like to the point where he would get so mad. He's like, why are these people, they should be moving beyond Batman now. They should be going into, you know, whatever. I'm trying like Mobius. So they should be moving from Mobius now to like, you know, some esoteric comic that only makes 50 issues a month. You know what I mean? Like that's the way he still is. I'm still friends with him. He only goes to restaurants that only have one location because like, oh, I discovered this restaurant before. And you know, that's just the way he is.
The hipster mentality.
Yeah. He was hipster back in the 70s, you know? And so he took me with them to the retailer. And then it was like, it was rowdy. It was like going, I was about to say Morton Downey Jr., but that's probably a dated reference.
I know who that is, though. He had
it was like Jerry Springer show.
Yeah. But a very political version of Jerry Springer, yeah.
It was people yelling like, you know, these comics suck and I'm going to lose my business. You know, here I thought we were going to be like discussing. Like Will Eisner once said, you know, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, it was like all these angry people who they didn't have cash registers. They operated out of shoe boxes, you know, or cigar boxes, you know, because it was all people like Larry. They just opened up comic book stores as an extension of their hobby, you know. And then Jim Henley would be there, like the one guy who knew how to run a business, like a comic book store as a business. He was the one that like he's the first non-creator to become a millionaire in comics, and he opened up a store in Staten Island, Jim Henley's Universe, and he opened up like a bunch of Jim Henley's throughout Manhattan and Brooklyn and Staten Island. And so he was like teaching people like, this is how you pay taxes. This is how you use a cash register, you know. And Larry took a class from Jim Henley, and I'll never forget. We literally went from an Optimo cigar box, his change, here's a nickel. Oh, I don't have a nickel. Here's a quarter, you know, to a cash register with, you know, ringing things up and how to submit your taxes and everything after doing this course. But I remember we were sitting there. And I didn't even realize it. I was such a young kid. I'm sitting next to Neil Adams and Neil Adams' daughter, you know, and I'm like, "Oh, you're pretty," you know. I'm like flirting. I'm like 14 years old, flirting with like a 19-year-old girl. You know what I mean? And she just was amused by me. And you know, Neil Adams didn't give me the time of day, but afterwards, Larry's like, "You were sitting next to Neil Adams." I was like, "Who's Neil?" I didn't even know who. And it was like people yelling and screaming, "You're changing these comics, and I can't sell them." You know, you know what is wrong with you? Nobody wants. I can only, and this was the 90s. You know, this was, you know, so I can only imagine how bad it got around 2014, 2015. You know, with all of these, you know, I remember the big deal was American Flag. Woodson, Howard Chaykin left American Flag, and the new artists were inferior. And I'm sitting on stacks of American Flag comics that I can't sell, and blah blah blah. You know, I just remember it was like I was embarrassed. You know, I was just sitting there like I don't know what to do. This is not what I expected. I thought it was going to be like we're going to a comic retailers convention, and like we were going to talk about Batman if he could beat up the Thing. You know, I was just a stupid little kid. You know, they were talking about like not making rent, and I was like, oh my God, this is like a real business. So that was a changer. I'm glad I went. You know,
what do you think about modern comic conventions? And I realize you weren't talking about a comic convention necessarily.
This was a retailer convention,
right? But what do you think about modern comic conventions?
I just want to tell this. One guy was going around, and he was like, "Give me all your old comics, and I'll trade them in for comics that people want." He goes, you know, and I forgot what he was doing. So and me and Larry were all excited about it because we had like just boxes and boxes and boxes of comics that we couldn't sell, Amethyst and, you know, whatever. And he was just like, yeah. And he goes, but once you deal with me, you got to keep dealing with me. And Larry's like, oh yeah. So I just remember stop going. I go, what happens if we don't have comics for you 1 month? He goes, then I'll have to pay you a visit. And all of a sudden I'm like, this is shady. You know what I mean? Like, my spidey senses went on. I was like, Larry, we're not going to work with this guy. He goes, what? You know, I'm like, this guy's trouble.
It was like mafia, like comic mafia.
I thought so. I think he was like some cop. So I don't know. That was like my one business decision. We're not dealing with this guy. You know, we're not dealing.
They make you sleep with the fishes, and they put.
I don't know. I don't know if I tanked Larry's business by. Well, he stayed in business another 15, 20 years after that. But I just remember that was like my one business. No, I'm getting. And he was like, okay. But anyway, what you say about modern comic conventions?
Well, because the way that you're describing how you had one expectation when you went to this retailers conference versus what it was actually like. And I kind of think the same thing about modern comic book conventions. You've never been to one before, and you're like, I love comics. I can't wait to show up and talk about comic books with people all day. And you go to a comic book convention in 2024. And maybe this is my own bias speaking, but you show up and you're like, oh, everyone here is just here to like get a picture taken with a TV star, or they're here to see the new preview of like a movie coming out, and no one actually cares about the comic book medium at that point.
You're absolutely right. I remember going. I grew up on Long Island, and there was comic conventions in the Holiday Inn. I'm trying to remember what they were called, and I remember going there, and Bill Willingham, who's now a superstar, he did the comic Fables, but at the time he was doing Elementals, and that was my comic. Oh man, I love that comic. That to me that was like the Watchmen before Watchmen. That was like the first superhero comic to like have logical consequences, you know, and like it was grim and gritty before grim and gritty, you know, but it was still firmly a superhero comic. And I remember going to that convention, and I must have. Bill Willingham, to his credit, didn't say, get out of here, little kid, you bother me. I hung out with him and talked to him. You know, I was watching him draw panels. You know what I mean? He autographed my comics, and I went around and I bought other comics. I remember talking to like Carmine Infantino and Roy Thomas. I talked with Walt Simonson, you know, literally talked, because it wasn't a mob scene. And I was maybe 15, 16 years old, still a kid. And you know, with an armful of comics talking about, you know, Beta Ray Bill and all this stuff. And then years later, you know, I met my wife, and I'm like, hey, let's go to New York Comic Con. So we went to Manhattan to the Javits Center to Comic Con, and she loved it. I was like nervous, but we went to a panel, and it was all old timers. It was Carmine Infantino and I think Don Heck, and, you know, like was some of the last appearances of these ancient first generation Marvel guys. And we just sat, and there must have been like 20 people in this panel. What a crime that these living legends were all there. And it was almost like they sat among us. They didn't sit on stage, and we just sat in a circle talking, telling old stories. And my wife loved it. It was so good. You know, and then we bought some comics. We went to the diner. We went to a few places in Manhattan and came home. We did that 5 years in a row. And then the last year, it was just like, we couldn't couldn't move. Everybody's in costume. 900 girls are dressed as Harley Quinn, and none of them can mention what comic she debuted in.
name 5 comics right now.
Right. But they were movie Harley Quinn. They weren't even
Right.
the animated series Harley Quinn, and it was just crowded. And I remember talking to a couple of vendors, and they were livid. Once you went to all the vendor stations, you could walk around. I was like, oh.
Where no one's actually there.
I paid $5,000 for this freaking tiny little space, and nobody's buying comics. Everybody's here to be, this guy likes Heath Ledger, and this girl looks like Harley.
Yeah, now we're peeling back some old wounds and pouring some salt in. Yeah,
they were livid. And then I remember my niece was like, "Hey, Uncle John, I'm going to go to comic convention. I got a Harley Quinn costume," and I'm like, "What comic did you buy?"
You're grounded.
She's like, "Buy comics?"
At a comic convention? No, I'm there to watch movies. What do you mean?
Yeah, so it was like movie stars and all about the TV shows. And I remember the last time we went to the Javits Center for the convention, Fringe, that show Fringe was the big thing. So like you went all the actors for Fringe and Josh Whedon's The Dollhouse. So I haven't been to Comic-Con since Fringe. So that's God knows how many years that is. 10 years we're talking. I'm like, I'll go to local comics. It
might be closer to 20, but whatever. Yeah. Who's counting?
Not long ago, geez. Maybe I think we've been to one since then. Now that I think about it, but I'll go to smaller cons by me, because it's local people like you that make comics, and then it's like you can actually talk to the creators. Like Larry Hama was there. I was able to talk to Larry Hama, as much as he hated being there. You could tell he was not happy. I'm trying
or just sour.
He's just sour because he wants to retire, but he didn't make enough money to retire. He wants to sit on the beach. This guy wrote, they're making movies based on his comics, and the guy still has to go to a convention. It's kind of embarrassing. Like, hey, it's this close to OnlyFans. You know what I mean? Hey, you want to talk to me and give me money for an autograph? He wants to hang out. He wants to live on. The guy did Savage Sword of Conan for 25 years, some of the best comics ever, and he can't afford to retire. It's sad, actually.
It was being in comic books ever as lucrative as little kids wanted to imagine it to be, or was it just like one in a million? Well,
Stan Lee, obviously. Jack Kirby, we forget he was like a millionaire before he even did Fantastic Four #1. He was doing he had newspaper strips. He had his own studio. I'd like to think Will Eisner made money. John Byrne retired. He only does what he feels like doing. I know George Perez retired earlier. There's a couple of people that made. Look at Mark Miller. He just sold everything to Netflix for millions. He even I had him on my channel, and that's one of his pitches. He'd like, hey, you draw comics? You want to do a 4-issue series for me? Become a millionaire? And yes, you know what I mean. So there are people making money, but like for every Mark Millar, you're having like I'm trying to think, Larry Hama, who's signing autographs at a convention, miserable. I try to be as nice as possible, but you could just see it in his eyes. He's like, guy's close to 80 years old and he needs to go to conventions. That's kind of sad. You'd like to think that they want to go to conventions, but
maybe not at 80. Maybe not at 80. know. You were talking a little bit earlier too about how at a certain point you kind of fell out with caring about Marvel and DC and Image and any of like the big publishers at that point. You started looking at smaller ones, and one of the fascinations that I've got, and it wasn't because they were really necessarily around as much when I was a kid, but when I found my dad's comic stash, and he had like Zap comics, and he had a whole bunch of like R. Crumb comics.
Oh, okay.
And then I found out about a whole different subgenre that isn't just underground comics. And I think that that's what you would consider like Zap and R. Crumb would be underground COMIX. And that's kind of like the way they would go by. But then there's like a subset, maybe you can correct me, of Tijuana Bibles, which are like previous to the underground comic scene, which I think was like tail end of the 60s, early 70s. But
I think
Tijuana Bibles
Tijuana
were earlier,
Bibles
right?
were like the 50s and 60s.
Are there any like known Tijuana Bible titles or artists or writers that would be like a shortcut to find some of them? Because I go into comic shops, and even if I'm going like cross country, if I'm doing conventions, I'll pop in, I'll ask for Tijuana Bibles, and half the time people don't even know what the heck I'm
people
talking
probably
about.
don't even know what you're talking about. For anybody watching, a Tijuana Bible is basically, they were made in Mexico by local artists. So a lot of times we don't know who wrote them and drew them. I do know that like Steve Ditko is rumored to do a few of them, and he denies it. But people say that this is Ditko's artwork or a real facsimile thereof. I think Joe Stanton did a couple. The guy, I always forget, Siegel and Schuster. I think it was Schuster did the art. He did Tijuana Bibles for a while too. Yeah, but those are the few people that we know. But they were basically dirty comics. So it would be a booby comic of Wonder Woman. Steve Trevor would tie Wonder Woman up, take her clothes off. I don't know if they got X-rated, but they got saucy for the times. And
For the 50s, absolutely.
Yeah, they sold. You'd get them at truck stops and underground head shops and things like that. So nowadays, they don't need to make it, because you could go on Kickstarter and get full on X-rated comics. I don't know if you remember like Omaha the Cat Dancer and Melody. Kitchen Sink Comics was making full on porn comics. There was Cherry, Pop Tart. Yeah,
I actually find those in like the dollar long boxes in my local shop. Sometimes I'll find like a Melody just like in there.
Yeah, Melody I thought was a great comic. Actually, it was originally called The Orgies of Abitiba, and it was set in French-speaking Quebec, I think. And then it was recollected and redrawn because the artist, the writer, drew it, and it wasn't that good. They got a new artist to redraw it. They called it Melody. The Confession of a Stripper. It was like 6 issues. I'm making like an all ages wholesome superhero comic book, but like I'm not a prude. I have a full set of Omaha the Cat Dancer and Joe Matt's Peep Show, which should not be read by normal good humans. He's like the most detestable person, but I find him fascinating. These old Fantagraphics and kitchen sink comics. I'm trying to think of other. Yeah, so they like I got a American Splendor. That was like
that one was actually fairly popular because I got a movie.
That was like one of the underground Robert Crumb comics that made it to the mainstream. That was like a breakthrough success, and they're excellent. I never got them. I was like those dirty hippies. I was a punk rocker. I didn't want to have anything to do with the hippies. But now as an adult, I'm like I want to get some of the American Harvey Seacrest, these American Splendor comics. So me being an anal retentive person, I had to get the first issue, and it was excellent. So now I've been buying collections because finding those stuff in good condition for a reasonable price is ridiculous. So I've been buying collected, Fantagraphics. If you go to their website, they'll make good hardcover collections of all that stuff, and it's good stuff. These guys were talented,
Fantagraphics has a very strict sort of submission policy. It's got to be like never digital. It's got to be like send them all the originals, and they really select things that are pretty like great. They've got like merit to them. And whenever they have those damn Black Friday sales, it's like it always takes a little chunk out of me. Yeah,
I never liked Silver Age comics for the longest time. I always thought they were hokey and silly and childlike, and now I'm loving like the innocence of Superman fighting Mxyzptlk, whose grand scheme is to turn everybody green or purple or elephant noses. You know what I mean? It's like I don't know. I just like, oh man, the world is getting to be really, really weird, and it's just something like, all right, I'm gonna go read an early Justice League when a space alien comes to Earth and just swaps everybody's powers. Oh, what a dilemma! Now Superman's Aquaman. Who cares? But
who cares?
But I just love the fact that Superman's like, I can't be Aquaman, and Aquaman's like, yeah, I can be Superman.
Yeah, for one of them, it was an upgrade for sure.
Exactly. The old Fawcett comics. I'm really trying to get them. I bought a collection of Captain Marvel Jr., the Mac Graboids. Oh my God, they're so good. They're so good.
I think Captain Marvel Jr. was the first introduction to Sabak too, which is one of like the OG references to real specific and explicit occultism in comics.
Yeah, what was it, Satan?
It was Satan, Azazel, Belial, Baphomet. I can't remember the last two.
Yeah, but it was hard. Yeah, and and it was.
Have you ever heard? No, I'll preface this with saying that like I think I only like 10% can be swayed on this, but I've heard it repeated very often, especially when I get into occult esoteric topics and comic books. And that's this rumor, again, 10% maybe, that Jack Parsons' dad was named Marvel, and that somehow he might have been a sort of archetype for the original Captain Marvel.
Right. He was a captain, and his name was Marvel, and he was friends with Fawcett, the guy who founded. Yeah, it's funny.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that he was friends.
It's funny that you said that because I have proof, but I play a role playing game. Anytime I'm on camera, I talk about this role playing game called Villains and Vigilantes. It came out in the 80s, and it's a superhero Dungeons and Dragons. There's an adventure where they time traveled and they meet Jack Parsons and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and they meet the original Captain Marvel, Jack Parsons' father, who was a secret agent, and he also might somehow have inspired James Bond. So the guy who somehow inspired James Bond also inspired Captain Marvel, who really his name was Captain Marvel. And here's a funny story: is Jack Parsons, the son, and I'm confusing because it's also tied to Lovecraft through Captain Marvel, Jack Parsons' father. He knew somebody that was friends with one of the Lovecraft people.
Really, this is all brand new news to me.
Oh, I'm a big conspiracy. I love all of this stuff. And also, one of the Jack Parsons' friends was the 12th generation descendant of Rabbi Ben Ibn Joseph, who was supposedly the person who created the Golem. So you had all of these literal occultists all hanging out, forming the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which created our space race program. They created solid fuel, and without Jack Parsons and this, we never would have made it to the moon. And then, of course, they got some of the Nazis later on to work it, and these guys were famous occultists. But the story that I love of Jack Parsons is he got interested in the occult when he was 12 years old, and I forget which book that he got on. This is supposed to be true. He got this book, and he summoned the devil, and the devil traumatized him so much that he gave up the occult until he was in his 20s, and then he went back into. So I always like, what happened? There's a book called Strange, but there's a great book that I read. It's all about Jack Parsons and his occultism. But he ended up buying a house in San Diego, and you could stay there provided you were an occultist, a scientist, or some sort of artist. And why can't I think of his name? The guy who founded Scientology.
L. Ron Hubbard.
L. Ron Hubbard stayed there, and L. Ron Hubbard became the chief financial officer of his church. Why can't I think of the name of it? But they followed out
Scientology. Dianetics.
No, but this is before Scientology. Scientology didn't exist yet. But Jack Parsons formed.
This is the OTO, isn't it? Or Golden Dawn?
OTO, yes, the Occult
OTO.
Order of Thelema or something like that. And
Ordo Tempo Templi
Ordo
Orientis.
Tempo Ordius or some yeah. And he was their chief, and they were going to summon the Great Mother, and they said they had this ritual. And then there was supposedly a
this is the Moonchild ritual that they went out into the middle of the desert, and they had Marjorie Cameron, and they were trying to invoke.
Well, she showed up. She showed up in the middle of a storm. This beautiful redhead with green eyes and everything like that. So Jack Parsons and her would have sex in front of everybody, trying to summon the great beast. Meanwhile, what's his name? L. Ron Hubbard was embezzling all the money, took 20 grand, and Jack Parsons' wife, who was 16 years old, underage, and took off to Florida. So when all of a sudden Jack Parsons like, where's all my money? Where's my wife? And he went after her, and supposedly he cast a spell and made a storm, and L. Ron Hubbard's yacht actually got caught in a storm and capsized, and he got arrested. And the Scientologists, when you bring this up to them, the Scientologists say, yeah, L. Ron Hubbard was a secret agent who infiltrated to rescue this underage girl. That's their story, to make L. Ron Hubbard the hero. But L. Ron Hubbard then took that 20 grand and used that to found the Sea Org and the Church of Scientology, all embezzled from Jack Parsons. And Alan Moore, the reason why I know this story is Alan Moore wrote that in a comic as part of Tomorrow Stories, in the Church of Scientology. He said, we're going to sue you into oblivion. So that story was never released. So I heard him talk about it in an interview, and I'm like, who's this Jack Parsons? And then because of that, I why can't I think of the name of the book? It's something called Strange, but there's a TV series about it now.
Strange Angel is the name of the TV
Strange
series.
Angel. There's a book. Yeah, there's a book called Strange Angel that the TV show is based on. It's excellent. Oh man, I got fascinated by the whole L. Ron Hubbard, Jack Parsons, to the point you're going to laugh because you're Paranoid American. Before I met my wife, one of my hobbies was trying to get recruited by cults, and I was working in Manhattan, and I'd go hang out at Washington Square Park and sit there and look like lost, and people would come up, hey, you want to go to a party? And then I would go off to a Scientology party and, hey, and then I would start talking. Didn't 1972, the Food and Drug Administration raid, Clearwater and say that these e-meters don't really work, that there's no scientific. So I'm the only person that you will ever meet that got thrown out of a Scientology recruitment drive.
That's actually not true. Actually not true, because when I was at Disney, I'll make this the shortest version of this story ever, but one of the guys that I worked at Disney in animation is the Royal Disney post-production here in Orlando. But he told me this story that when he was over by like Cal Arts, and he got recruited into Scientology, and he made his way all the way up to the point where they start giving you some kind of audits. And one of the audits is you sit into a room with another Scientologist. It's supposed to be like a level above you, and you stare at each other. And some people, they'll break down crying, or some people will like have all sorts of emotional reactions just to staring at someone for like 10 or 15 minutes. And my friend that I work with, he was a much older guy, and he had this most infectious laugh. And as soon as he would sit down to do these audits, he'd start like, and he'd start chuckling, and then he would break down to a laughter, and the auditor would start laughing too, because they couldn't resist. And they had to keep replacing the auditor with like the manager, and then the manager, and he kept making everyone break down. And at a certain point, they told him like, you're not ready for that. Like, Scientology is not for you, because they couldn't admit that they didn't have someone that was so high up, that was so clear that they were immune from his infectious laughter. It was like he was the freaking like game genie of Scientology recruitment.
Yeah, I was holding the e-meters, and I'm just like, I could go outside and have a Gatorade, and that'll change my electrolytes and resistance. I'm an electrician. All you're doing is measuring the electrical resistance of my body, and that could change by my dinner. So I said, you imply science in the term. So where's your control? You got to have charts and everything like that. So let me see what these meetings mean, because like, again, if I want to get this, I'll go out and have a Gatorade, and that'll change the conductivity, and that'll change everything. Do you have what is the rubric to change scores if I tell you that I had 2 Gatorades before coming in? And they're like, get out. I was like, all right.
Well, and this is like the most corporate of all cults that you could try in court, right? So like, did you have a wish list? Like, if any cult could have recruited you, where you're like hoping for the Process Church to knock on your door or something?
The which church?
You heard the Process Church, which is apparently where Son of Sam was supposed to be a member of, and that the Undermeyer had all these secret meetings, and they were all orchestrated by the Process Church.
No,
so if you haven't heard of that, was there one that you had heard of, and you're like, man, I really hope they get me?
The family. They were actually coming to my apartment and having meetings, and I didn't believe, but I just was like tell me more about, and then, my
This
wife
is like
moved in.
typical extrovert behavior, by the way.
My wife moved in, and like they called up, and and my wife's like, you got to give this up. You got to give this up. So I gave up trying to get recruited by cults for my wife.
Are there any national cults that you, and I don't want to say that you would have wanted to join, but do you feel like you might have been the most susceptible to, even if it like geographically wouldn't worked out?
No, I mean, when I lived in Long Beach, New York, it was very Hasidic neighborhood, and the Hasidic Jews used to come to my door, and I used to invite them in, and we would have talks, and we would talk about the Kabbalah, and everything like that. And then my roommate was a Coptic Christian from Egypt, and he had a funny looking cross, not like a regular cross, like it had loops and everything like that. And finally, one of the rabbis saw that. He goes, "Are you Jewish?" I said, "No, I never said I was Jewish." And he made like abjurations to protect himself or whatever, left. And then they stopped coming. But I enjoyed sitting down with I like talking about religion with people like that. I have a degree in ancient history with a minor in theology, so I like all this stuff. I don't necessarily believe in all of it, but I'm fascinated. I'll talk to you about Greek mythology the same way I'll talk about the Old Testament, the same way I'll talk about the Mormon. When I lived out in Albuquerque, the Mormons used to come to the door, and we would sit and talk about the Book of Mormon.
Are there any Mormon comics, even if it's not overt? Are there any that are like, oh, this is clearly the story of Joseph Smith or Solar Babies or something?
Battlestar Galactica is Mormon.
Right. Yeah, like almost explicitly so.
Right. And I don't know if you know Mark Allred, who did Mad Men. Madman, rather. Excuse me, Madman. He did the Silver Surfer series with Dan Slott at Marvel. He did for his Mormon mission. He did the Golden Plates, and he did a comic book of Joseph Smith and the Gold. And I want to get
Is
a
it
copy.
published?
Yeah, I'm trying to get a copy of it. I think it's like something that you can only get in the Mormon Church, because he did it for the Mormon Church. But I love his art. He's one of my favorites. He's been on my channel. Is it called
the Golden Plates?
Ever. I'd love to get a copy of it.
Is that the name of it? Is called the Golden Plates?
I think it's called the Golden Plates. Yeah.
If I can track that one down, I'll let you know, because that actually sounds fascinating to me. And I'm curious too. Have you ever heard of the book by Christopher Knowles, the Our Gods Wear Spandex?
No.
So I recommend it. It's a little bit dated now. I think I read it like 20 plus years ago, but it's basically a book about all of the influence of the original DC and Marvel characters and the ancient gods that they were all based on.
Wow. That's right up my alley.
And like the religious upbringings of a lot of the original creators, and how a lot of these links aren't just sort of arbitrary, like there was actually rooted in them. Gets into like the golem magic and stuff. It's a fascinating book.
Yeah, the thing is the golem. Superman is Moses from Siegel and Schuster. There is, and Marston made Wonder Woman like the female supreme being, into bondage and everything. There's a lot of cool stuff.
And Diana, which is basically Artemis, the huntress, which kind of all falls in line with a lot. So I guess this leads me to maybe get into some more woo-woo sort of topic here. But I'm pretty sure it was Neil Gaiman. It might have been Neil Gaiman or Alan Moore, but I think Neil Gaiman made this claim that comic books to him are magical sigils, and that like the more time that you kind of put into this graphic sigil and you put out into the world, that it has real magic behind it.
That sounds like Alan Moore. Yeah.
Do you prescribe to that at all?
I remember I was big into Carl Sagan growing up. Carl Sagan was like one of the guys that just really influenced me. And to me, he's like the first person to really turn magic into like not magic, turn science into like awe. Like as a little kid, it was always Jack Kirby, John Romita, and all this stuff. But then Carl Sagan came along and like got me to look at planets and black holes and think about like the awe and majesty of science. And I'll never forget what he said. He goes, isn't it magic to think that you could just look at these symbols on a piece of dead tree and the thoughts of a person long dead are transmitted into your brain? He goes, isn't that magic? He's talking about writing, So in that respect, comic books are magic. You know what I mean? Like I'm looking at directly into Jack Kirby's imagination. You know, when you read OMAC is like prophetic. Like to me, that series, I think it lasted 8 issues. It's the most prophetic of Jack Kirby's career, of a man who's unlimited imagination. That book to me is the peak of his. I read that and it's like, it's almost like prophecies. You know, he's talking about cell phones. He's talking about fascist governments. He's talking about people who trade in convenience for government control. You know, stuff that like in the 70s. Yeah, I know that was already done in like by George Orwell and stuff like that. But it just and look at the New Gods. Everybody had the mother box. That was just a cell phone. You know, things like that. I just think that is magic. You know, reading the comic. So Alan Moore is not wrong, but I also think Alan Moore likes to exaggerate things to be an edgy. He's still like an edgy 16-year-old kid. You know,
yeah, he definitely visits Hot Topic or his equivalent of Hot Topic very often.
You know, he worships that snake god, and I can't remember the name of the snake god, but the whole people who worship the snake god, they created a puppet and controlled it. This is back in like, I don't even know, like the year 600. And they let everybody know it was a puppet. But the fact that you worship this puppet, you're worshiping the idea that knowing that it's a puppet means that you still recognize the fact that even a puppet could be divine. Like, you know, so he worships this puppet because he knows that it's not a god, but the fact that it's not a god means it's closer to divinity, you know. And it's like, do you even believe this, Alan? Like, you just found something kooky and like, you know, but you're brilliant and I still love you. You know, he's like the one guy that could like just come out and tell me I'm an ass. And I'm like, okay, Alan, I'm an ass. I still love you. Him and John Byrne are the
in such a compelling way though, that you might also be like, damn, I guess I am.
You know, like, I it sounds like I'm name dropping, but Mark Millar was on my channel and he said he knows Alan Moore. He said he is the sweetest, nicest guy in person. He goes, but he doesn't really give interviews. And then somebody said something, and he goes, so he goes, he sounds more crotchety than he actually is. He goes, but he's like, you know, I would, that's him and John Byrne are my two holy grails. I would love to have those two guys on my channel. Talk to them.
Yeah, I would say that the more occult and esoteric you are in nature, the less your statements will survive a game of telephone. Like they'll break down within one iteration of that.
And then I just love the idea that Alan Moore and Grant Morrison are two wizards that have been battling each other through their comics for the past 20 years. You know, for some reason they have a feud, but then again, do they really have a feud? This could just be like a kayfabe thing. Who knows? But
I've heard this referred to as almost like a Aleister Crowley versus Rudolph Hess, which was like an OG sort of wizard battle that, Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman might be in one of these as well.
Well, it sounds like Neil Gaiman's losing if you know about his news lately.
I mean, on a long enough timeline.
I got so mad because Sandman is one of my favorite comics. It's like a comic that was near and dear to me. Throughout my poorest college years, I still made sure that I got the newest issue of Sandman. And then I've seen a TV show is being made about it, and I just got so mad that the woman cast as Death. I didn't care that it was a black woman, but I was just care that the character of Death is supposed to be this duality. It's, you know, she's not Caucasian. The Endless are white, like alabaster. You know, they're not my skin color. They're alabaster and they have black hair and they wear black clothes. They're duality because death is also life. Dream is also reality. Design is also destruction. Delirium is also delight. Like they're embodiments of dilemmas. They're black and white, not Caucasian and Negro or Hispanic and Asian or whatever. So I said, I don't care that you cast a black woman. I said, but she should absolutely be. And he's like, oh, you want her in whiteface because you're a racist. And I was just like, Neil, I know you're smarter than this. You know, you're just nothing but a disappointment. You know what I mean? Like I said, there's no point even considering entertaining this conversation anymore. You know what I'm talking about. but whatever,
There's the company line too that you notice, and I would say the same. I mean, we might as well be talking about the Snow White remake. We might as well be talking about the one for me that you might not care as much about because you said you weren't huge on Deadpool, but I was so psyched that Domino. That was like my first comic book crush ever. But before Jean Grey or before Rogue or any, like, they were up there, but Domino for some reason. So yeah, that one I'll never forgive. As soon as it started,
I like that actress too.
I do too.
I like that actress, but
he looks too much like John Candy in Spaceballs, man. I couldn't get over it.
It's like, they cast why can't I think of her name? Zoe Saldana, to be Gamora, and Gamora's green, so they cast a dark woman, put green makeup on it. You know what I mean? Cast whoever you want. We got CGI, we got makeup. But Domino, she's supposed to look like a domino, so she's supposed to be black with white, and another one is supposed to be just black and white. That's part of the character. I don't know why.
We're gonna get dangerously into some crotchety old man.
Yeah, I know.
Territory.
I have no tolerance for race swap, gender swap. I that's not the character. And this is the thing that gets me mad about Neil Gaiman is. He said in an interview, he goes, if you are a fan of Batman and they're going to make a Batman movie, and then you go to see the movie and it's a guy in a yellow trench coat with a pet bat solving crimes, that's not the character that you want. That's not the character you love. People want to see their characters on the screen. And then when I say I wanted to see death as a dilemma, as black and white, not an abstract black and white, not human skin tones, you're a racist. Okay. You know what I'm talking about. You created the character. You know exactly. Don't play dumb with me, Neil.
I'm not a racist. Then you open up your R. Crumb comic, watch it like reading Mammies.
Yes,
You said too that you're a big conspiracy theory fan, so that's a perfect segue. I've got a quick little segment, it's like 10 seconds long, and then it's going to lead into like a little game show kind of segment. I'll explain the rules in a second.
Sure.
Hey, conspiracy buffs, I double dare you to take some PCP, the Paranormal Conspiracy Probe. On your marks, get set, and go!
All right, the rules are pretty simple. I'm just going to mention a certain topic, and you're going to give me a 1 to 10 rating on how much credibility you give it. So, for example, if I said rate Bigfoot 1 to 10 on how much you believe Bigfoot exists, where would you put that on that scale?
Bigfoot. It's funny. I'm fascinated with Bigfoot, but I never really thought about, is he real or not? I'd say out of all the conspiracy theories, 4, we would have found Bigfoot by now.
All right, with Bigfoot being a 4 as a baseline, what about Mothman?
1.
Any other cryptid? Chupacabra?
Chupacabra, I'd say a 7. There could be some sort of mutant or mutated animal, doing something, or we had that tiger in India that killed 36 humans because it had an injured foot and it couldn't hunt. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
and Chupacabra, I think it translates directly to like goat sucker. So anything that could drink the blood of a goat could technically be a Chupacabra.
Right. Yeah. So there could be some sort of animal or even a crazy person.
I like how this is going already, man. There's like some logic behind these. How about flat Earth 1 to 10?
It's funny. One of my coworkers is a flat earther, and
does he call you a globetard?
No, but he started laughing one day because I went to Iceland. For my 50th birthday, my wife treated me to a trip to Iceland, and there's a part in Iceland where you could literally touch the European tectonic plate and the North American tectonic plate. If you watch Game of Thrones, it was the Blood Gates. There was like a little narrow pass, and then they CGI'd a little fence. And, but if you take away this, it's in Iceland. So they filmed a lot of the north parts of Game of Thrones in Iceland. So I was there, and I was telling the story, and he wasn't even, he was in the room where we were all working, and he's just like, and he says, what a tectonic plate. So I'm explaining that I didn't know he was a flat earther. And then a couple of days later, me and my friends are having a game night in a bar. We would go to a bar and play game, and he showed up. Like, I didn't invite him. He just heard me talking about the game night. So he showed up, and he got drunk, and he just started going off on everybody not believing in the flat Earth. And one of the guys in my game group works for the Weather Channel.
He's a shill.
So he took out his cell phone and he started showing him satellite. He had access to satellites, to weather satellites. He was a scientist. So he's like, what am I looking at? He goes, here's Tokyo, here's Moscow. These are weather satellites. I have the codes. And he goes, I don't know that's real. I don't anything anybody said, any proof whatsoever. I don't know if that's real. That could be computer generated. So I finally said to him, you're an electrician. You're doing pretty good. I said, do you have a friend? And he got all mad at me. I said, do you have a friend? I said, because your friend could stay here. You could go to Tokyo and call your friend and Zoom each other. And it's going to be dark over there or light over here or vice versa. That could only happen if the Earth is curved. I said,
not necessarily. I mean, I've been down these flat Earth rabbit holes, and there is an explanation for every single anomaly you can think of. But the one that you just mentioned would be explained away by a localized sun or multiple localized suns that are literally, I think some of the claims are that they're 30,000 miles away or something. I don't know how the math works out, but it's one of the explanations
that got him mad. And it's funny because he's a black Afrocentrist. Blacks invented computers 10,000 years ago and everything. So the next day at work, I was busting his balls. I was talking to another guy knowing that he's listening. And I said that there's no Africa. And my friend was like, what are you talking about? And he wasn't in on it. He didn't realize I was busting his balls. So he's taking out his phone. I go, I don't know. That's not real. That could be computer generated. And then at the end of the day, I turned around. His name was Eric. I go, Eric, do you see how ridiculous you sound?
So does this mean you put flat Earth at a 1, a 2,
a 0,
5, a 0? Okay. How about the concept of hollow Earth?
I love hollow Earth. If any of them I want to be real, that's the one I want to be real. But I do believe that there's hollow structures. That I know for a fact out in Albuquerque that there's these volcanic tubes. If you saw that movie Evolution, they actually talk about it. But there's a tube network throughout the whole Southwest into Mexico, and I think up to like North Dakota, that are unexplored. And I do think that there's government headquarters, and they use them for transport. And some say that there's trains that could actually go from like California to DC to New York or whatever. But I don't necessarily think the Earth is hollow. I mean, I do think that there's large chambers. But, can we fly it? And then there's another sun and there's dinosaurs. That would be so cool, but 0.
Yeah, then we're getting into to like Tarzan area where he goes inside.
Right? Isn't that what it's called?
Yeah. Which actually has a pretty strong like eugenic background to it if you look into it. But anyway, that's for another show. A couple more ones on these 1 to 10 scales because I'm curious. That a human being has stepped foot on the moon in the last 100 years. Any country, any program.
I was in an astronomy class in Albuquerque, and one of the things that we did was, first off, it was funny because we talked about astronomy versus astrology, and the teacher talked about how it was astronomy, not astrology, and one girl got up and was livid. How dare you talk about astrology? That's not a science, blah, 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 blah. And she left, and he goes, there's usually 2 every semester.
Total Capricorn.
Yeah.
You should have said that on the way out.
So that would have been funny if he said that. But one of the things that we did was we went and looked at the telescopes, and we looked at the debris on the moon. So he says...
Like the little reflectors, you mean?
Yeah. He goes, so we've been on the moon, He goes, we looked and saw because Albuquerque, New Mexico has really good conditions for telescopes, and he goes, so we've been there. He goes, but if you want to argue we've never been there, he goes, we've been there. He goes, but the only argument that I could see people making is when, so there you go.
So are you a 10 that human beings
we've been to the moon? I mean, you could see all the debris clear as day.
Can
through
you?
telescopes? Yeah.
Is that real?
Unless this guy put a film over the telescope, because we were moving the
Or
telescope.
holographic projections, or who knows? It's painted on there like it's a matte painting. So, I mean, I'm curious though. Are you like a 9 on this or a 10 on this?
I'd say a 10. We've been to the moon.
How about 1 to 10 rating on the footage that was shown in the late 60s of the Apollo 11 mission of people walking on the moon? How real do you think that footage was?
That, you could cast a lot of doubts on that, but I believe it's real. I believe it's real.
10 real or like
10
9 real?
10.
How about the existence of conventional dinosaurs? You walk into the Museum of Natural History, see a big T-Rex skeleton. How accurate do you think that is on 1 to 10?
I think there were dinosaurs. I was really sad to find out that the Brontosaurus wasn't real, that it was a mistake. But how the Earth is billions of years old, there were so many cool creatures that existed. I still think that there's undiscovered creatures now. I don't think it. I know people like they were demons and stuff like that, but no, they were dinosaurs.
Okay, 10, 9, 10.
10.
How about fire-breathing flying dragons having existed at any point in history?
I wish. I just can't believe in fire-breathing flying dragons. I mean, did we find petrodons or pterodons? I don't know. But you know what? Did they spit a combustible saliva that burst? Who knows? I'll say
Greek fire, some kind.
I'll say a 5.
And then I guess last one. There's no official order, but 9/11 was an inside job.
No, I don't think it was an inside job, but I think Pentagon was set up once they knew that 9/11 was happening, and they blew up the Pentagon. I mean, how does a plane fly that low? You know what I mean? Guys who had just trained. So the Pentagon, I think, is some shenanigans. But I was there at 9/11. Planes hit I saw it. My brother was there, saw it. My brother's father, he saw the planes coming, and he was in the Twin Towers. But I will say that they abused it. They took advantage of it. And I know I'll catch hell for saying this, but most of the firemen that died, they died robbing the basement. It was all gold and jewelry exchanges. They didn't save anybody. They just went in and, when that ladder 12, 24, they found jeans, they found gold bracelets. These guys everybody was looting when the freaking things fell down. So
I've never heard that before.
Oh, yeah.
What about Building 7? Because a lot of people point to say ignore the Twin Towers. Why did Building 7, the thing that didn't even get hit, just completely fell into its own footprint?
My buddy John was in charge of the safety. He was one of the OSHA guys who was assigned to that building, and he literally was standing in front of the doors, keeping the firemen out. He said the firemen were just going in and taking TVs and furniture and stuff. He's like, so they were literally like fist fighting. But I don't know, man. I don't know how that building blew up. That one, if you could convince me that was an inside job too.
Right. Well, that one had
that one didn't get hit by anything.
Right. It just maybe debris and just in the proximity of heat, but there was also and I'm not fishing or trying to convert you yet. We don't have enough time for me to convert you. Maybe one day, but that the Twin Towers and in particular Building 7 were just loaded with asbestos, and the amount of money it would have taken to kind of remove it and retrofit it and replace the asbestos, it was cheaper to just knock it down. But then you've got all sorts of so it. Kind of the way that you described the Pentagon, like, here's an opportunity for us to do this thing that we've been wanting to do. Could have been a thing for Building 7. I don't know. There's also the Shanksville where the plane just kind of vaporized in the middle of the sky. I don't know.
I worked in Manhattan, there's construction where I worked at buildings where we were sweeping the glass out, of nearby buildings from the shattering, the impacts, and that's how close we were. But I do think I think those crazies went and hijacked planes and that, but I just don't see how guys who took like 2 classes on flying a plane, could fly a plane that low to hit the Pentagon. You know, how tall is the Pentagon? 30 feet. You know, they flew 30 feet above the ground. I don't buy it. You know, the impact, it should have been like across the whole top instead of just one side.
Right, the size of the hole, the lack of the wreckage,
so
everything about it.
And if anybody, you know, and anybody says that the government are the good guys, there's a conspiracy theory that it's, you know.
So, we could keep going on. I do want to wrap this up. Just maybe
you didn't ask about space aliens. You know, I thought that was going to be number one. Do you believe in space?
Oh yeah, well yeah, actually yeah. Let's do two of those because I want to know: do you believe in grays in particular, little gray space aliens, 1 to 10?
I want there to be space aliens, and at the same time, it would be terrifying if there was space aliens. But I haven't seen any convincing proof. I'm a cynical. I don't believe in anything. You know, I don't believe in anything unless you can prove it to me. You know, like. You know, I'm like the onus of the argument is on the you say the space aliens, then you got to provide me so the default is there aren't until I know that there are. But I really want there to be space aliens, and I haven't seen any compelling proof that there are. You know, everybody that was abducted is always a goofball. There's always a story, but man, I read all of those blue book cases and everything like that because they're so fun and they're so cool. And the universe is so big, like you'd think it would just be a shame that we were the only living things. But like, is it, we're just distance keeping us apart? Like, is there something about science we just don't understand? You know, like, is there a prime directive and they're hiding from us?
Yeah, we're just too dumb to interact with.
Or is it like something even like, thank God they haven't seen us yet. You know, like, how bad would it be? You know, like,
or I mean, the other aspect too would be like the Zecharia Sitchin aspect of that. We are this alien ant farm. Like we were put here to mine precious minerals, you know what I mean? And extract them. And then once we've kind of exhausted the resource, then they swoop in and they take it all from us.
Do you ever read The Lensman?
I don't think I'm familiar with that. No.
The Lensman is like the first space opera. I think the first book was written in the 1920s and I think the last book was the 1950s, but it was the inspiration for Green Lantern Corps, you know, things. So I got really into the novels and pulps that inspired the superheroes, but the Lensman was the original Green Lantern Corps. But what I liked about the space there is there's space races, but they're so alien that it doesn't matter. Like we'll land on the same planets and they have different concerns, different needs that like we just move out of each other's ways. And to me, like that's how I think aliens would be. Like what are the odds that they need our metals? Because if they could fly through space, they got all the like what could the Earth possibly offer us a spacefaring civilization? You know what I mean? Oh, you guys got carbon. We need carbon. You know,
no, it's always the human spirit. That's what
right,
it is.
Yeah, so souls or whatever. Yeah. So like, if there are spacefaring humans, they're looking at us like we look at like the primitives in the Brazilian forests. Like, you know what I mean? Like
that's kind of how I see it too. Is that even if there were extraterrestrials, they would like we would be the exit you don't pull off. Right. You're like, let's take the next exit, honey. This one doesn't look too safe.
Because think of it, they must have like cold fusion and like, you know, they breathe different, they eat different stuff. Their chemistry must be totally different. They would have they would probably be more interested in Neptune and Jupiter than Earth. You know.
And for good, well, so I guess where's your number at though? If we're talking space aliens 1 to 10, you want to believe, but you're
50-50. You know, it's a 50-50. You know.
How about because I feel like this is sort of the pendulum swinging to the other side. What about angels and demons? Do you give them a 5 too, or do you have a more firm stance?
I'm closer to 0.
What is it that makes aliens that you haven't seen any proof of a 5, but angels and demons are a 0?
Because there's no proof of other realms. You know, you can look up. We could see other planets. You know, there's measurable planets now through Hubble telescopes. We could see other stars, but where are these other dimensions? You know, that is purely hypothetical. That is pure wish fulfillment. You know, ghosts, like to me, a vampire or not a vampire, but like a werewolf is more realistic than an angel or a demon. And I know
Or a
right
ghost.
now because
So I guess we call it ghost as in the angel demon category.
yeah, the spiritual stuff, like where we can't, there's no empirical data. So yeah, I err on the side of show me the data, So
I like this. Is there anything else that we did that I should have asked you in this 1 to 10 that you would like to answer?
what
Do you have a go-to conspiracy theory that's your favorite? If someone's like, "Hey,
Andy Kaufman's still alive. He faked his death. He's hanging out. He's hanging out with Elvis somewhere.
still now?" Yeah. Oh well, Elvis. Do you think that at any point, you don't have to say like he's alive right now in 2024?
Elvis, that guy died. They were poisoning him. Colonel Tom was feeding him pills to rob him blind. I don't think they meant to kill him. Same with Michael Jackson. But when your cash cow says, "Give me this," you give it to him, just like John Belushi. I like what the judge said to the woman who sold John Belushi the drugs. She's like, "Yeah, when John Belushi asks you for cocaine, you give it to him." And then the judge said, "Yeah, well then, if you said no, then somebody else would be going to jail. You're going." I know. I and also keep this in mind. Just because I don't believe in the occult, I do believe that other people believe in the occult.
Well, that almost seems obvious. Like I don't think anyone can really dispute that.
Because my wife is going through a very religious awakening right now, and she's like praying, like she cries, "I'm going to go to heaven, and you're not." You know what I mean? But
he'll forgive me. That's the one that you should say. Oh, he'll forgive me. That's kind of his thing.
But the Epstein Island people, 100%, they were doing wacky stuff. Whether they believe it or it's just, I believe. Like I said, I've tried to get recruited by cults. Those people, like, I don't know if the head of the Scientology people believe in all this nonsense, but people believe in that nonsense. And there are people that. There's people that worship Baphomet. Whether Baphomet is real or not is besides the point, And in an Alan Moore way, just like that puppet god that he worships, then he's real.
It's a good point. If you're like a super occultist, like you might not actually believe in a literal Baphomet, but just the symbol itself and worshiping the archetype is like an egregore. That becomes just as important.
If it's affecting the real world, that's Alan Moore's argument. Baphomet exists because it's affecting the real world. If I'm like making crosses and investigating because I believe that somebody else believes in Baphomet, Baphomet's affecting the real world. It's affecting my actions. So therefore Baphomet exists, and that's the argument that he makes that Batman exists because, there's people that collect Batman stuff and go out of their way to do this for Batman. And, they're writing Batman comics and they're getting paid, and you know what I mean? So Batman is affecting the real world. So in an Alan Moore sense, Batman exists.
And I guess as a little poke to Alan Moore, but I'm not going to be able to help imagining a guy in a yellow raincoat with a bat on his shoulder every time I hear Batman now. So now that Batman also exists, even if it's just within me and you.
Yeah, I know. And Neil Gaiman. Thank you, Neil.
So you mentioned you've got a campaign going right now too. Go, do like a full pitch, like sell me on it.
Okay. Let me.
If you want to share a screen or something, feel free.
Just making sure I'm sharing the correct thing. Yeah, you gotta bring it on. But there you go. I have a comic out right now. It's on Fund My Comic. I got 195 backers. This is my first campaign. 5,000, and I got another 1,000. Yeah, I did another 1,000 on Kickstarter. But this is Heroic Tales. The name of the comic is Heroic Tales. Here's the cover. It's drawn by Renzo Rodriguez, written by me. And the first issue debuts the Patriarch. And the Patriarch he's everything that's good about masculinity. I got real tired of in culture today, everybody talking bad about toxic masculinity and whatever. So he's everything that's positive about men. He's a good father. He's a devoted husband. He's a beloved superhero. He's a good guy. And this is a variant cover drawn by Pat Broderick, one of my favorite comic book artists. And then this is where he lives. This is what he wants to do. He wants to go home with his 7 children. That's his wife down there in the purple.
Trout wife.
They homestead, they homeschool, because let's face it, there's crazy supervillains in the world. So there's a reason why they're off the grid. I'll tell that story around issue 3. And this is all he wants to do, but he patrols Science City. Now, Science City, you'll like, because this is where my conspiracy theory stuff comes in. Science City is built by Yuma, Arizona. And it was designed by Ian Strange, who's an architect and also a magician. So it's built based on magic symbols and magic sigils and everything. And it's there to harness science and magic. When I was out in Albuquerque, outside of Yuma, Arizona, everybody was like, "Oh, the ley lines here, or ley lines here, and the magic and everything like that." And you got it. It's beautiful. There is something magical in the air, whether you believe it or not. Natural. So I was like, this is a perfect place. And then I read that outside of Yuma, Arizona, the deserts, you could harness solar energy and power a city. So I was like, there you go, my comic book. So this guy, he took the solar power and the magic ley lines and designed the perfect utopian city. But unfortunately, the industrialist, Philip Manning, didn't build it to the exact specifications. Could you see this statue of the Colossus of Rhodes in the back?
Oh, yeah, faintly, yeah.
Yeah, well, that was supposed to be a spire. And all the magic and ley line energy was supposed to be dispersed through the spire, and everybody was supposed to have perfect harmony. But instead, it's a statue of the man who built the city. So that magic is the wrong frequency. And now we get people who wake up dressed like 30s gangsters and rob banks. Because I wanted to be like, how come Gotham City has guys who dress up like penguins and clowns, but not Baltimore? Seattle doesn't have any clown killers. There has to be something about Gotham City. So this is the reason why people go nuts in Science City, because of this magic spell that was improperly cast. And then he gets beautiful showgirls. He does everything ostentatiously and robs banks. And then the patriarch, shows up. So I just wanted to show off the beautiful colors and the wonderful art by Renzo.
How many pages is this?
It's a 22-page story of the patriarch, and then an 8-page story of the suit. The mayor of Science City, how he became a supervillain. Because if you know me, the politicians are always the bad guys. So it's the day that the suit made a decision and became a bad guy. So that's set in the past. Because next issue you'll see, a more older version of Lucius Kane, who goes by the name of the suit. So it's 22 pages patriarch, 8 pages of unheroic tales featuring the suit, and then a couple of fake ads on a letters page. $10, complete story. You don't have to wait 9 months to get part 2. Is a metallic coin that I love coins. A beer glass, because he's a dad, so you got to have a beer. And if I will show you, I'm gonna show the Kickstarter if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
Because I have a variant cover on the Kickstarter drawn by Michael T. Gilbert. So you could get this on Kickstarter, or you could get the Pat Broderick on Fund My Comic. And this I'm doing pretty good too. And then I also have a Michael Gustovich cover that'll be on Indiegogo. So I wanted to go on all 3 platforms with something different. But
are you staggering these, or do you have all 3 campaigns running at the same time?
They were supposed to be staggered, but I did the Fund My Comic for 4 months instead of 2 months by accident. And once I hit launched, I couldn't change it. So it was supposed to be staggered, but but it gave people longer time to buy the comics. Don't tell anybody, but when Indiegogo's done, I'm going to take all the covers and give like a second chance campaign, and you can get everything on Fund My Comic. Fund My Comic is going to be the home, because Luke, the owner of Fund My Comic, he's one of us. He's a comic book guy. He doesn't do shadow banning. He doesn't care about your politics. He has follow these rules, and your comic could be on my.
He's awesome. Fund My Comic is absolutely phenomenal. Right. I'm still trying to crack that nut. Like Luke re-shared and tweeted and did all the promo I think that he possibly could for one of the books that I ran. and it got like $80 on Fund My Comic, and it did great on like the corporate. I'm still trying to transfer over there, but I don't know. Did I say the wrong thing? Is there like a secret handshake that I have to know to court the audience of?
It's promotion. Like, this is gonna sound mean, but I didn't know you had a comic. I didn't know you had a channel until you reached out to me. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna.
Now I'm on your radar. Now I'm on your radar.
Well, what's the name of your comic?
So actually, I've got. We'll do tit for tat here because here's my
come on my channel. Come on my channel and we'll talk.
Accepted. Already accepted. So I've released I think 10 different titles between this and last year.
I just saw this today. Never.
There you go. So yeah, you've come across it. You just maybe didn't know it was me, but
no, I didn't know it was you. Yeah,
I've been working on this for over 5 years. It's got 3 different artists that I've known. 2 of them came from the Joe Kubert school. So it's got some really good talent inside of it. It's 40 pages. It's all about Stanley Kubrick directing the moon landings. And I've got variants.
This is such a clever idea for a comic. Like 2 hours ago, I just saw this on Twitter.
Oh, there you go. See, some of the marketing's working a little bit. But yeah, this book, and we were talking about a whole bunch of, like you were talking about the Epstein Island thing. I've got a book called Frazzle Drip Funhouse. That's kind of about that one.
See, that kind of stuff, I believe.
So yeah, well, I'll have to send you some little teasers from my whole catalog.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is what I've been doing for the last 12 years is conspiracy theories meets comic.
And you're a writer?
I'm a writer, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't draw to save my life. Yeah, I got Heroic Tales. We're already working on issue 2 of Heroic Tales. And issue 2 is gonna feature the Patriarch. He's my flagship character. So every issue is gonna have the Patriarch, but then I'm gonna have a shorter other superhero story. So I got issue number 2 is going to debut a character, Mary Sue, and Mary Sue is the perfect woman, and the trials and tribulations of being the perfect woman. Her name is Sue, S-U. It's a Chinese name. Her family they fled communist China because they were Roman Catholics in communist China. They fled in the 50s, and they opened up a little corner store, and then their son turned it into a big supermarket, and now it's like a Walmart, so it's Sue Mart. So she's rich, she's beautiful, she's a PhD, she's 22 years old and a genius, and she's perfect. But
I love this premise. And you said the Patriarch's your first foray into publishing your own book at this point?
Yes.
Why did it take this long?
Because I didn't think I could. I didn't think it was possible. I've been role playing a superhero game with my buddies since we were 14 years old, and I have, not even joking, I must have like 1,000 superhero character of NPCs and then their characters. So, the world of Heroic Tales is my world that I've been working on for 40 years. So I know the world inside and out. I have to change a few things because when you're playing role playing games, you steal stuff from Marvel and DC. But now that I'm doing, I have to change a few things. But anyway.
What was the thing that made you go from thinking, oh, I can't do that, to like, oh, I guess I can do this?
I started listening to your boy Zach, Diversity in Comics. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Now he's Comics Matter. And he made a comic. And I'm like, wow, he made a comic. And I saw he made a killing. But then I told you, RJ from the Fourth Age brought me on his channel. And, we were interviewing each other. He made a comic. I'm like, wow, a bunch of people are making comics. Like, I didn't realize there was this indie scene of people making their own comics. So I started writing my script, and my channel started picking up. And then I had Jim Shooter on my channel. And like, everybody's like, oh, this guy, John Longbox. And I'm like, I got to make it now. Strike while the iron is hot. My star isn't going to rise any higher, So what am I going to wait 3 years? And people are like, didn't that guy have Jim Shooter on his channel once? Yeah, I think. So I just put everything in motion.
Smart.
Yeah. And
I wish you
I'm doing better than I thought I would do.
I think you're doing phenomenal, especially for a first run. Like all my first projects, I think the goals were pretty much like $500. And when I hit it, I was ecstatic. So you're pushing the numbers that seem like it's proven the model, and it proves that you're doing something that people want to read.
I mean, I'm breaking even right now, so it's not like I'm making any money. But
I mean, that if you were to look at the whole landscape, that kind of makes you in like the top 5%. I would admit, just breaking even probably puts you in indie comics in the top 5%.
Yeah, I have a team. I got Renzo Rodriguez doing my art, and I got Daniel De La Silva Rodriguez doing the color. I got Oscar Carano doing the colors for the backup, and Ron Mosicki doing the art for the backup. These guys get paid instantly. You know what I mean? Instantly before I do anything else. And I'm taking the first issue on the arm, and now I got that $6,000 to make the second issue. Is the way I'm looking at it. So I'm just hoping now if I can make 10 issues and it only cost me $6,000, like I have no illusions of making any money or retiring. I'm a construction worker. I do okay. But this is my goal is to.
You don't think Disney's going to want to option your patriarch?
Yeah, they already told me that they want to get Lizzo to play the patriarch. So I'm going to sign the paperwork tomorrow.
Well, yeah, call me from your Lambo. It'll probably have like the little hot tub and the phone and all that stuff. Or you can call me from Epstein Island because I think that's the next stop.
I'll call you from the Temple of Baal. Yeah, the Baal.
John, thank you so much for talking to me. This was actually a huge pleasure, man. We talked shop for a while. We got into all different angles. You even shut all over.
I don't shut up. I'm easy to talk to. Just got to say hello to me. I'll talk.
You got to do some work to pull me out of my hidey hole sometimes, but I'll absolutely come on if you ever want to talk more shop.
Yeah, come on. This is fun.
Let's do it, man.
Let people. I think that NASA comic is such a great premise. You got to come on and start telling people about that. That's an awesome premise. It's so clever. It's such a clever premise, and I love it.
I think you'll really love it too. Like I've also over my, I guess, like course of doing these independent comics is that at a certain point you realize that you got to write it for other people to enjoy too, not just yourself. Like it can't just all be inside of John's D&D head because right. Why all this stuff is happening and all these cool little interactions. But this NASA comic is the first one in a very long time that I feel like it can stand by itself on the merit of the story and the art. Like, I don't know. I'm in love with it. Like this is a comic that I would have loved to have found in a shop. Like I would be all over this thing. So. Yeah,
when I originally wrote the first script for Heroic Tales, my friends were like, "I don't care. This is your role playing game.
Yeah,
vomited on a page." And I was like, "Yeah, but it's brilliant and it's great." And they're like, "No, this is just too much." Like they said, pick one character, tell that character story, And I was like, all right, I'll pick the patriarch. And they're like, why are you picking the patriarch? I'm like, because I think it's important to have like a positive male character. He's a good father. And they're like, okay, good. So they forced me to defend all of my decisions, and I think they absolutely made the right choice. So I went from world building, the vomit comic, to a focused story about a character that I think you'll like, and then every issue you'll learn more about the world. Like you already know more about the world than you'd get from the issue because I was telling you because I knew you were into the conspiracy theories.
I like the term vomit comic. I've made my own one up. I was calling mine first one the kitchen sink comic, but now I'm going to call vomit comic. I'll give you credit if anyone ever asks.
We you read you get excited. So
It's also like in my mind, it's like the inverse of a band that comes out and releases an amazing debut album, like a Nirvana or so, I don't know, I'm dating myself, but like a band will come out with this amazing debut album and then they're kind of like trying to match that. And everyone's always like, play your first album. They're like, oh my God, I hate this. Like, what about all my new stuff? And it's because they had like 20 years,
right?
Or in some cases like 10 years to work it out and pick like the absolute best. And then once they get a record deal, now it's like, okay, now do what took you 10 years in 1 year and do it every year for the next. And that's kind of what happens with a comic too, but it doesn't work. It's not the same formula where it's like all the best part. Like maybe it is, but in my experience, like the first book that I wrote and a lot of other independent comics, the first one they write, it's like every damn thought they've ever had over the last 20 years crammed into this one story. And if you've got good friends, like I guess you did, they're like, whoa, like pick the one. Like if you're at a toy store, right? You're like a little kid and you're like grabbing every single thing in the aisle and your parents are like, pick one.
Well, look at it this way. You're making a soup and you're putting everything you like in that soup.
Right. Right. Which I've done before. Yeah, we'll throw some ketchup in there and a little bit of
this is good too. Yeah, this is this. And then you're making a garbage soup. You know what I mean? This is too much.
Although sometimes you end up with Jungle Juice too, which is just as fun.
Yeah, you never know. But so I pulled back, focused, and and then I called it Heroic Tales because every issue was going to have a different character, and then I realized, am I going to shoot myself in the foot? Everybody seems to like the Patriarch, and then the next issue is another character. And then the third, by the time I get back to the Patriarch, it's 5 years later, and people are like, yeah, well.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, man. Yeah,
so he's going to be the focus, and then I'll tell. But I have these other characters. Like I have a Batman story I want to tell. Superman. I have a conspiracy theory. He's kind of like Rorschach, conspiracy theory guy.
I'm in, man. I'm already sold. I'm a cheap date when it comes to conspiracy theories.
Yeah. Well, I also feel like I'm only charging $10 for the comic. Because comics are supposed to be accessible. They're supposed to be cheap, accessible.
Free shipping?
Well, I can't do that.
I bet not. Yeah. I was going to say, well, because again, I started in 2012, and in 2012, even if I was doing a short run with like a local print, like Kablam here in Orlando, which I don't use anymore, they got really expensive. But even back then, I could get a book for maybe 80 cents, $1 if I was doing a fairly big short run. And then the shipping was, I don't know, $3, $4. But now, man, prices have tripled on both fronts. I like when you were going through your rewards and I saw a $10 comic and a freaking glass, like a tumbler glass for $20. Like, how does the math even work, man? Do you have like Filipino children working in your basement producing all this stuff?
No, but then it adds the shipping on afterwards. So it was another, so you know what I mean? It was $20.
Yeah. God help you if you're in Australia. You're basically having
but
to
if you're in New York and you want to pick it up, I got guys at work that just give me $10 and I
pay you a visit. Especially if you don't order another one next month. Maybe they'll just come pay you a little visit.
Paranoid American.
All right. Thanks, John. I'll let you go, man. We're going to connect again. This was so much fun. I appreciate your time.
Come on my channel. We'll talk about your comics.
Give one more shout out to tell people where they can find you and follow you.
I'm at John's Long Box on YouTube, and you could go to Fund My Comic and look at Heroic Tales. And if you're into Kickstarter, you could go to Kickstarter and look at Heroic Tales. And then and I think about 3 more weeks, I'm going to go to Indiegogo and look up Heroic Tales. But
awesome.
I think my next campaign, I'm just going to stay on Fund My Comic. I think I'm just dividing it too much, spreading it out too thin.
I bounce back around on that. So yeah, I'll keep in touch with you and see how it works out for you. And if you spread back out, it's hard to know how the hell this industry works anymore.
Well, I never did it before, so I didn't know. I'm learning every day. I can't wait to start fulfilling. I'm gonna make every mistake in the book again.
All right, man. I'll see you for the next one. Thanks.
All right, see ya. Bye-bye.
Spread the word with propaganda packs, all for just $40 shipped at paranoidamerican.com.
Paranoid propaganda packs. We got facts on these sticker slaps. So grab yourself a stack and go attack with these paranoid propaganda packs.
These huge all-weather slaps will last in public for years to come. Remind citizens that birds are not real. Self-immolation is an option, and might make you magnetic. Do your part and get a propaganda pack today from paranoidamerican.com.
Paranoid propaganda packs. We got facts on these sticker slaps. So grab yourself a stack and go attack with these paranoid propaganda packs.
What are you waiting for? Go to paranoidamerican.com right now and get a paranoid propaganda pack.
Ready for a cosmic conspiracy about Stanley Kubrick, moon landings, and the CIA? Go visit nasacomic.com.
nasacomic.com, CIA's biggest con. Stanley Kubrick put us on, that's why we're singing this song. I'm nasacomic.com. Go visit nasacomic.com. Go visit nasacomic.com. Yeah, go visit nasacomic.com. Oh, nasacomic.com.
Never a Straight Answer is a 40-page comic about Stanley Kubrick directing the Apollo space missions.
Yeah, go visit NASAcomic.com.
This is the perfect read for comic, Kubrick, or conspiracy fans of all ages. For more details, visit nasacomic.com.
All American stickers, cryptids, cults, and killers. We got all your favorite conspiracies, all of that and more on our sticker sheets. Paranoid American stickers, they'll make you smile and snicker. False flags and secret societies, all of these and more on our sticker sheets.
Explore the unique with Paranoid American sticker sheets. Unearth tales of cryptids, cults, and mysteries through each sticker. These won't last long. Get yours now at paranoidamerican.com.
All American stickers, cryptids, cults, and killers. We got all your favorite conspiracies, all of that and more on our sticker sheets. Paranoid American stickers, they'll make you smile and snicker. False flags and secret societies, all of these and more on our sticker sheets.
What the heck are you waiting for? Discover the extraordinary with Paranoid American sticker sheets. From cryptids in the night to cults out of sight, each sticker is a unique find. Get yours now at paranoidamerican.com.
Paranoid. Yo. I scribble my life away, driven to write the page. Will it enlighten your brain? Give you the flight, my plane, paper the highs ablaze. Somewhat of an amazing feel when it's real to real. You will engage it. Your favorite, of course, the Lord of an arrangement. I gave you the proper results to hit the pavement. If they get emotional, hey, maybe your language, a game, how they playing it well without Lakers. Evade them, whatever the cost, they are the shapeshift. Snakes get decapitated, met is the apex. Execution of flame you out, nuclear bomb distributed at war, rather gruesome for eyes to see. Max them out, then I light my trees. Blow it off in the face, you're despising me for what though? Calculated and rather cutthroat. Paranoid American must be all the blunt smoke for real. Lord, give me a day away, vacate. They wait around to hate whatever they say. Matters not in the least bit. We get heavy rotate when a beat hits, so thank us, you're welcome. Fuck the niggas for real, you're welcome. They ain't never had a deal, you're welcome. Man, they lacking appeal, you're welcome. Yet they doing it still, you're welcome.